Robby, what's on your radar today?
Assata Shakur, a domestic terrorist and murderer who escaped from a U.S. prison in 1979 and lived in exile in Cuba ever since, has died at age 78. Shakur was a far-left communist radical associated with extremist groups like the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army in the 1960s and 1970s. This makes her a popular figure with many leftists, even though she is also a convicted cop killer. Indeed, she has been on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list since 2013. Of her numerous crimes, the most heinous, of course, was the murder of New Jersey State Trooper Werner Forster on May 2nd, 1973, during a traffic stop. She was convicted of the murder, but escaped from prison in 1979 with the help of left-wing groups, and she fled to Cuba, where the communist government welcomed her as a hero. But Cuban communists are not the only ones who revere Shakur as a hero, rather than a murderer. For decades, she's been a popular figure among leftist radicals. News headlines from mainstream and progressive outlets often recognize her as the godmother of Tupac Shakur, as if she were just another celebrity. The New York Times obituary describes her as a convicted revolutionary. That sounds pretty cool, like they went after her because she was too hip and edgy, too revolutionary. But no, she wasn't convicted of being a revolutionary. She was convicted of cold-blooded murder. She was also charged with numerous other crimes, by the way, including bank robbery, armed robbery, other murders. Those charges didn't stick for a variety of reasons. Cop killer did stick. She was convicted of it. I think that's not the sort of person we would want to hold up as a role model. Call me crazy. And yet leftists are using the occasion of her death to memorialize her as someone who spoke truth to power and fought for a more equitable world. Seriously, the remembrances are pouring in. The Democratic Socialists of America wrote on X, "Rest in power," and thanked Cuba, an authoritarian state that brutally jails dissenters, for their solidarity and loyalty, allowing Assata to live out her days in Havana. That's the kind of state the Democratic Socialists admire, one where cop killers are revered and actual forces for liberation are repressed. I'll just add a reminder here, by the way, that Zoran Mamdani, the would-be mayor of New York City, is a member of this group, the Democratic Socialists. But look, I expect the DSA Twitter account to say stupid things like this. They're a bunch of Marxist radicals. Fine. I was a little taken aback to see the Chicago Teachers Union also celebrating the life of a convicted cop killer, Assata Shakur. The X account for CTU wrote the following: "Rest in power, rest in peace, Assata Shakur. Today we honor the life and legacy of a revolutionary fighter, a fierce writer, a revealed elder of black liberation, and a leader of freedom, whose spirit continues to live in our struggle." Assata refused to be silenced. She taught us that it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It's our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. End quote. Well, those are some really nice sentiments to share about a murderer. The DSA is one thing, but this group, the Chicago Teachers Union, is responsible for educating your children. And they think it's important to recognize the honor, life, and legacy of a killer. By the way, lest you think the Chicago Teachers Union simply tries to find nice things to say whenever anybody famous dies, there was no statement from this organization on the death of Charlie Kirk. But I guess Kirk expressed ideas the teachers' unions disagreed with, which is a disqualifying offense, unlike, murder. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty interested in school choice right now. Other individuals who memorialize Assata Shakur's death include Democratic Representatives Ayanna Pressley and Summer Lee, of course. Here's the big picture. In the past several weeks, individuals with demonstrably left-wing motivations have committed appalling crimes on the basis of those beliefs. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, the shooting of the ICE detention facility in Dallas. In response, conservatives are expressing consternation that leftists do not decry violence more vocally, whereas many progressives are saying, well, of course we don't support violence. You're the ones who support violence. In this regard, Assata Shakur is a good test. No one who says, I oppose political violence, should be believed if they also tweet, "Rest in power, Assata Shakur." Shakur did not want to reform the system through nonviolent resistance. She wanted to kill people who stood in her way, and also to commit a bunch of random violence and robberies in the process. Cuba harbored her because the authoritarian Cuban government approved of the violence and mayhem she caused in the U.S. Trust me, communist governments don't approve of violence and mayhem unless they are the ones doing it, or unless it's aimed at the enemies of the state. The mainstream media wants us to believe that left-wing violence is not a serious problem. In fact, right-wing violence is worse or more prevalent, they say. Yet I don't see any Republican politicians, conservative interest groups, or MAGA media figures posting sympathetic tributes to Timothy McVeigh or to Dylan Roof. Assata Shakur, though, her poetry is apparently worthy of recitation, according to the teachers' unions and some Democratic figures. It's disgusting, frankly, and some more moderate Democrats do recognize that. Kudos to Democratic New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, who writes on X that the left's response to Assata Shakur's death is, quote, shameful and depraved. She was convicted of the murder of New Jersey State Trooper Werner Forster, who was executed in cold blood. There are so many worthy heroes to celebrate. She is not one of them. Amen. The left says they don't approve of political violence. But if they approve of Assata Shakur, worship her, in fact, then, well, I usually say make it make sense, but in this case, you just can't.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah.
You guys are really wrapped up in this. So, you don't have to agree with everything that Assata Shakur did or like anything about her to understand that anything that she did, anything that she stood for, to understand that there's a broader, complicated issue tied to her and police going after the Black liberation movement. So that has to be a fact. So you understand history.
They went after them because they're criminals.
The trial wasn't clear-cut. So if you know about the trial in full, you know that she maintained her innocence, that she says that her arms were up, she didn't shoot the cop, and that doctors testified that her testimony is consistent with how the wounds hit her. So we have that piece of it. Also, doctors supported her account, and there's not enough evidence. Even the New York Times said there's no actual thing tying her to the gunshot or the bullet, no fingerprints evidence. This is all based on hearsay. And New Jersey has a law specifically that if you are in the vicinity or around somebody who does kill a cop at that time, then it's called the accomplice liability, that you're going to jail. And so she's facing life sentence when her hands were reportedly up. Now, out of 10 indictments, because you mentioned that she's also been they've accused her of multiple things, 9 out of 10 of them never stuck. And so in the 1970s, this was prevalent that you tried to take people who were of the Black liberation movement or the Black Panthers and tie things to them. Not making this up. Look at Huey P. Newton, who started the Black Panther Party, accused of things and then acquitted after that. She was acquitted, dismissed, or had hung juries in all 9, except for this one instance where they pulled her over for a tail light, saying that she was going after the cops after that, started shooting. She says they shot first, her hands were up, and so now here we have it, and she fled to Cuba. Now, I want to give you a history lesson, because if you know about the 1970s, we were barely a decade after the Civil Rights Act, meaning Black people barely had rights, right? That's what the Civil Rights was for. They had to fight for freedom from oppression and slavery, and the way people behaved still in that fashion, even though there was a free America. So in the 60s, MLK and everybody was fighting for these things. And so Assata was around during that time, and they were protesting harassment, outright violence, and they didn't want to sit back and just say, oh, let's peacefully protest like MLK, even though MLK was being surveilled by the FBI as well.
Protest by robbing banks?
But she's not convicted of any of that stuff. So you're just naming things.
She was part of a criminal gang.
The FBI, let me talk for 9 minutes. Please let me talk. So the FBI had a COINTEL program, which was an illegal campaign designed specifically to neutralize Black people that stood up, Black leaders, anti-war activists. This was a criminal program that was illegal through infiltration. The FBI was in the room when Malcolm X was killed, didn't do anything, allowed it to happen. There were informants undercover. This is Black resistance movement, watching it happen. The FBI was around as they arrested. Theorists. No, this is proven fact. Like this movie.
This is like when right-wing people say, "Oh, they just walked into the Capitol and they didn't do anything wrong. They thought they allowed to be there."
So tell me about
this is your version of the.
Fred Hampton was drugged and shot 100 times by cops and in coordination with the FBI. It's not police misconduct. He's part of the Black Panther Party. He's part of the Black Panther Party and was shot and killed by our government, the FBI, and cops in coordination. And that's been proven by a criminal and civil lawsuit against them because of the way that Fred Hampton was killed. So if you are telling me that if you don't understand the history of this country and why in the 70s people would have a distrust of somebody getting pulled over for a tail light and you saying that all of a sudden she shot at you when she has wounds inconsistent with what the account from the police are saying, then you are foolish and don't understand our country's history. So the fact that I think that you just don't understand our country's history.
In pursuit of this organization that I would disagree with. I am not some apologist for everything the police do.
Obviously you are, because you're telling me that this woman just killed somebody, but everything about that trial was inconsistent and there was a concerted effort to go after people of color that were part of these resistance
I don't think she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think she was part of a violent, radical organization.
That's not proven, though. That's your perspective. That's your perspective.
Well, I mean, it is.
And many people celebrate her legacy because she represents the survival of a system that was intentionally oppressing black people. And so when she escaped and people never thought she did it in the first place, they're saying, okay, Cuba provided some exile for her and some refuge for her, for somebody who was just standing up trying to liberate black people, and that was her entire mission.
She was just trying to stand up and
yes,
liberate
she didn't shoot
black
the cop.
people?
If they're saying that there's no proof going consistent with what you're saying,
She was convicted.
I don't think they're supposed to automatically trust the cops in the 70s. You're asking black people for a lot who just got their rights finalized 10 years before that.
Okay.
So if you were a person of color that was constantly oppressed, beaten up for drinking out of the wrong water fountain, did not have the proper rights, and then people start to create a movement to say, stand up for yourselves, that's called the liberation
But they
and
weren't
resistance
standing up for
movement.
themselves. They were robbing people.
No, that's not proven. You said 9 out of 10 of those cases that were put up against her have dropped, hung juries, or failed, or she was acquitted. So this is incorrect. If we're going based off the law, your law failed
She was
9
part
times.
of a group that was engaged in that activity. She was not convicted of being the perpetrator of every single one of those crimes. No, she was convicted of the murder.
Okay, Robby, if you were getting beat and whooped and slavery was in your history and people were constantly attacking you so much they had to put laws through Congress, I think 72 hours and 72 different leaders at the time, I believe, were saying they're against in Congress for black people to have civil rights. That was the time that they lived in. So
I don't want to hear left-wing people say we don't support violence. Then clearly left-wing people do endorse political violence.
You must support violence if you think that it's okay for black people to be treated that way. She was standing up in her own way to say, I don't go for this. And so that's why people celebrate her legacy.
Violence.
My point is that that's
I
what
support leaders within the black community, like Martin Luther King,
do you understand what the Black Panthers were?
nonviolent
Do you understand
resistance.
what the Black Panthers were? They were giving food to communities in Harlem, serving out children food and helping communities, teaching educational programs, community programs. They put in place.
They were mobsters.
For the same. No, that's not true. They were put in place to uplift the community in a different way, in a different route than MLK. And if you don't understand the history of this country, then obviously you, Cash Patel, and everyone else who wants to be simple-minded about this and act like her legacy can be brought down to a simple cop killer, it's just, you're trying to play dumb. Or you should read a history book and understand what time it was in the 70s and why everything that the cops say does not hold merit.
Now you're making excuses for
I'm not making
violence
an excuse. No, that's not
and
violence.
murder and robbery.
You're making excuses for inconsistent damages on this woman's body that show her arms were up by doctors and telling me I should just believe the cops. When in fact, before there were cameras, we know that cops have done many things. And in fact, when we saw Fred Hampton killed, we understand that cops have done many things.
They robbed a bank to get the money to break her out of prison. Like the criminal associations of these people is just so obvious, and I don't understand the excuse making.
If somebody did not commit a crime and believe they did not commit a crime, and the cops were actively after Black Panther,
if this was any other group and you didn't agree with them ideologically, you would, again, if it was the January 6th,
there's no other group.
You would easily say lock them up for their criminal behavior.
Unfortunately, and for your perspective, there's no other group in our country that was demoralized and dehumanized for decades and decades and decades and fought for their rights and finally came up with one plan to specifically try to create an equal society, which is where we're in right now. So you're equating something that can never equate, because Black people were slaves in this country and then moved on to try to fight for civil rights. And then after that, there's still people to this day that are still racist that we can agree upon, that are still trying to oppress and bring us back. And so the Black liberation movement was significant, and so that people said they're not going to stand for it and they're going to put their foot down and figure out ways to move forward. And there was an active, concerted effort by the FBI and other government entities and cops to bring those people back into their place that they thought they needed to be in. And so that's where we are. And Assata Shakur was part of that resistance movement.
And you think that was tactically useful or persuasive in helping get people more civil rights?
Do I think it's tactically useful or persuasive for the cops to pull over for a tail light because they wanted to get this lady for something? I don't think neither is tactically useful. Do I think it's tactically useful that we sit in this country and pretend like slavery doesn't affect us all and don't want to acknowledge it? Have a president right now who doesn't want to actually acknowledge that slavery was as bad as it was. He wants to celebrate the 250th anniversary of this country.
You don't want to acknowledge
and he wants
that
to
like murdering a cop is as bad as it was.
But I don't acknowledge that is the whole story. Doctors don't acknowledge. Forensic evidence doesn't acknowledge it. That's what I'm telling you. So there's people that actually just want to acknowledge the facts and understand the time period of the 70s and why that would be problematic without full proof.
All right.
Robby, what is on your radar?
I'm also talking about the Democrats fighting President Trump. Well, Democrats are, of course, furious over how the Trump administration is treating private companies and demanding compliance and even censorship. And the Democrats are vowing that when and if they're returned to power, they will treat private companies exactly the same way. Seriously, that's the plan. Punish anybody and everybody who went along with the Trump administration, made some decision that was in line with what Trump wanted, or made programming decisions that catered to the preferences of MAGA. Don't take my word for it. Here was what Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell had to say the other day as he vowed to vindictively investigate or even sanction Trump complicit companies and individuals.
Well, first, we are making it clear that we're going into the majority a year from now. We have every intention to do that, and so we will bring oversight, accountability. We will subpoena the Department of Justice, but also private actors who have done these drug deals with the administration, college campuses, entertainment companies, law firms. And so accountability is coming. And so, one, it's all coming out. Two, I hope that deters people from doing more of these deals, these one-offs with the president.
So the beatings will continue until morale improves. That's basically the Democrats' message. Don't do what Trump wants or we'll hurt you. Now, Swalwell is clearly referencing a couple different things. Universities agreeing to abide by certain education department policies, media companies ridding themselves of liberal, unfunny late-night hosts, law firms deciding not to do battle with Trump, and so on. I certainly don't agree with all of the decisions that these institutions have made, but they have the right to make them, and they have the right to react to incentives. Do I think the federal government should pressure these companies to behave a certain way? Well, of course not. I've said so. I've criticized Trump for being too heavy-handed when it came to the universities, to Kimmel, and on other issues. Just as I criticized Biden for exhorting social media companies to censor more content. What it sounds like, what Swalwell is conceding, is that the Democrats have no principled opposition to what Trump is doing whatsoever. They just don't like Trump. It's not a very good sales pitch. Imagine if Democrats were reacting to this mostly by saying, hey, you tech CEO, hey, you media company, hey, you law firm, school, or television host, when we're in charge, we're going to leave you alone. We'll let you do right by your customers and prosper as a firm, as a business, as an institution. That, I think, would be an enticing proposal. Maybe it would tempt more private sector leaders into supporting Democrats. But it ain't going to happen, because Democrats are ideologically committed to the idea that they should use jawboning and antitrust and punitive regulation to destroy companies that get in their way, support policies they don't like, cause nebulous and ill-defined consumer harms as determined by the likes of Elizabeth Warren and Lena Khan, or are just plain too successful. Trump, on the other hand, is merely selectively opposed to firms that are mean to him. His opposition is not ideological whatsoever. It's personal, deeply personal. That's still not great, to be clear, but firms have figured out that they can work with it. Don't go too hard against Trump, and you're going to get left alone. Meanwhile, even if your company bends over backwards to appease the Democrats, there will still be committed progressives, even socialists within the party, who are determined to destroy you. Zohran Mamdani, anyone? Swalwell isn't even particularly progressive. He's just another liberal Democrat, and even he is dying to investigate companies and schools that went along with Trump. You can bet the hard left is salivating over the prospect of doing even more. Long story short, this is exactly why the business community is going to remain safely in Republican hands. I'm sorry. I'm sure that nobody at ABC or CBS or wherever else likes getting yelled at by Trump, but they likely know that the alternative is much, much worse for their businesses.
I'm so sad. I want to cry.
Oh.
I'm really, because
you need
I need a Kleenex.
Yeah.
Because I just, hold on.
Yeah, there we
But
go.
listen, I don't understand how you're reading that. And you're saying, of course, I don't like it. It's bad. But bow down to Trump or he won't work with you. They learn how to work with that strategy. That's an embarrassing strategy. That's not a good strategy that we want our president to be using. Strong-arming folks and play nice with me.
Democrats are going to strong-arm them anyway.
Because it's a personal vendetta, Democrats are trying to put government oversight in places where they're trying to oversee and do what the government is tasked to do. Trump is having a political vendetta against people that he doesn't like personally and saying, do what I want, otherwise I'll sue you and put it in my presidential library. Now, at the same time, I think that most Americans, because we probably would agree here, feel like Congress is, and the president and everybody are just doing too much with the back and forth. I think America as a whole is exhausted by the constant, like, you do this, I do this, like, no one's ever going to end it. You've mentioned many examples of Democrats doing things that to me felt like an overreach. I've mentioned many examples of Trump doing things and his administration doing things. But I think when you put Harvard University, Columbia University, CBS and Paramount into a corner, I can't criticize them for the decisions that they made when they want to continue to move forward with business.
Democrats want to investigate them.
Yeah, but
they want to haul them before
Congress. That's why I'm saying I don't agree with what Swalwell's saying to continue to move down that rabbit hole, but I understand the need for oversight because it's like, well, if you made this deal with Trump, what does it look like as the administration changes or when the next Republican comes in? Like, what have you said off the record or off camera? Like, we know that the Columbia deal, for example, was $200 million and a bunch of other things written in there about what they will do. But what else did you tell him? Or what behind the scenes? Because you said it's personal. So I think that should make any government official concerned to say, well, this is personal and about what Trump wants to be done rather than the good for the American people, which I hope when Democrats are doing investigations are to come up with information to find what American people are looking for.
The Democrats think that they know what's
something
good
totally
for the American
different.
People, which is
but Trump's not even pretending to try to know what's good with the American people.
Okay, I'm the CEO of Robby Corp. We are a alternate media platform. We make videos or something. We've been very successful.
Okay.
Now we could if we have to deal with Trump, then we know that he got mad at us over something, but we've kind of fixed that relationship. We know not to make him mad anymore, and we had to give like $10 million to his inaugural fund or something. That's the one outcome. The other is the Democrats.
That's like bribery.
Let me finish. It's not personal, but they want to break Robby Corp. Robby Corp has been too successful. They want to break Robby Corp up into many smaller companies. They want to change Robby Corp's liability protection so that it's more easy to sue us. They think Robby Corp is too bad for children or whatever, and so they're going to make us have a digital ID to sign into Robby Corp. I
like some of those first parts of your statement.
They want to regulate and tax Robby Corp much more heavily. It's just like, forget it. We're going to support Trump. I'm going to give $20 million to the inaugural fund. Can't have Democrats in charge. And it's for the American people's own good. The American people love Robby Corp. They use it at very high numbers. They get information.
Okay,
there's a nice program called Rising on it. That's the situation.
In an ideal world, public interest.
Robby Corp is going MAGA for this reason.
In an ideal world, public interest should spark oversight. It shouldn't be revenge that's sparking oversight.
Democrats can decide what public interest is.
But if they hear their constituents, that's the best thing to me. If people at home are saying, hey, I have kids that are on the Robby Corp app and it's deteriorating their mental wellness. They've been sadder. They've been more depressed. They've been having conversations that I'm not comfortable with.
I'd like to see some statistical evidence of that.
That people on social media... Okay. Oh, I'm saying these have been complaints from parents about social media, and then you're like, oh, keep your kid off of it, right? It's easy to say they go to school and have access to these things.
Well,
Keep them out of school and homeschool them.
No. The schools.
Keep apps out of school.
Phones out of school.
So you want to make everybody else be responsible, except for the companies that are making addictive software and things that parents are. It's very addictive. There are several studies about how addictive social media has become, with even creating this feeling of euphoria when you see somebody like something. Like, it was intentional, and then the alerts that you get. Now you can turn them all off, but there's been therapists and people that have researched how social media affects our brain.
They said this about TV and video games and the radio and every communication innovation in the history of mankind, and it's all proven to be nonsense. So I remain skeptical on that front.
Robby, what's on your radar?
Happy to get to it. Well, Teachers Union President Randi Weingarten is back on the media circuit, promoting her new book, which is called Why Fascists Fear Teachers. And while she steadfastly maintains that her book is not classifying any specific person as a fascist, it's pretty clear she's talking about people who disagree with her politically or who disagree with the agenda of the teachers' unions. In other words, she's talking about me, and maybe she's talking about you. Weingarten does appear to believe that the American education system is under fascist occupation. She's even wearing a paperclip. Watch this.
There is a reason why Putin said that wars are won by teachers. There is a reason why in Norway, when the Nazis took over Norway, that's why I'm wearing this paperclip. I wear two things now: the American flag, nobody can take patriotism away from me, and a paperclip. What did the teachers in Norway do when there was the Nazi occupation? They started wearing paperclips. Kids started wearing paperclips. Why? To bind people together as community. Education is power. Education is knowledge. Education overcomes the culture wars.
I thought we all agreed that our political rhetoric was getting too unhinged, too overheated, too emotional, too exaggerated, and that it might be making desperate people do bad things. And now you're telling me that the nation's top educator wrote a book implicitly referring to her opponents as fascists. Maybe the sequel should be called Why Everyone Who Disagrees with Me is Hitler. Perhaps Weingarten is just trying to distract from the fact that many, many Americans are profoundly dissatisfied with the state of public education in this country, not because teachers have too little power, but because the union that represents them is doing us all harm. Indeed, there's no single figure more responsible for keeping schools closed during COVID for so long than Randy Weingarten. The teachers' unions were the main driver, the main political force engaged in the work of pressuring relevant authorities and lawmakers to keep schools closed until we had reached COVID-0. They'd still be closed. Those people had their way. But now Weingarten doesn't want to blame the education crisis in American schools on that fateful decision to keep schools closed. She thinks plummeting test scores are the result of smartphones. Watch what she said later in that interview.
I think we all have to figure out how to make schools a priority if, God forbid, there's another pandemic. But this started 10 years before that. And what is happening is our biggest competitor are the phones, are social media. And what I think we have to do is four things, four words. We have to create schools so that they are safe and welcoming. And we have to compete with social media and with the attention for kids by having project-based instruction like we do in terms of career tech ed.
Now look, I'm happy to talk about updating the kinds of instruction that take place in schools, whether project-based learning is better for some kids, whether new technology can be better incorporated. And yes, of course, kids should not be using their smartphones while they're supposed to be paying attention in class. That's such a no-brainer, get the distraction devices out of the classroom, that it's cold comfort to me that school leaders have taken 10 years to realize it. Shouldn't you have told the kids they have to leave their phones in their lockers on like day 2 of these things being everywhere? But I digress. The real issue is that Weingarten is portraying herself and the teachers that she represents as the opposition faction during an attempted fascist takeover of the U.S. education system. But this just isn't the lived experience of most Americans. The teachers' union is the number one, most powerful, most relevant decision maker here. Their fingerprints are all over these failing policies. That doesn't make them fascists, of course. It makes Randy Weingarten responsible for the mess we're dealing with now. I don't know if fascists fear teachers, but I do know that families shouldn't fear teachers' unions. The solution is not to direct more funding, more resources, and more power to the likes of Randy Weingarten. The solution is school choice, more options for parents so that families can make decisions that best fit their own children.
So we talked about this several times. I don't like the overuse of any words. Fascist, comparing people to Hitler.
Fascist.
Yeah, everything is, and you know it happens on both sides. We pointed out examples. Even former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called Randy Weingarten, I looked this up in 2022, the most dangerous person in the world. There's been an ongoing beef with her and everyone.
The most dangerous person
I know,
in the
it's
world.
so, like, come on. Well, so
Pretty negative actor in our politics, in my view.
Okay, fine. It's oversimplifying and dramatic. I think she pointed out in her book that, and because she said she wasn't talking about anyone, we have to go with her word. It's her book. She pointed out that traditionally fascists have attacked education systems, banned books, prevented people from learning in order to try to get their goal across historically. So if she's not talking about our specific country and her specific role, she's talking about what could happen if we were in that type of dictatorship. Mm-hmm. She didn't name drop President Trump in the book. Her book highlights teachers throughout the country. There's so many things about it that set examples of public education and how it's working, because I know the overwhelming conversation is how it's failing, but there are tons of kids doing well in our schools. I mean, obviously we can do better.
Over time.
And we should do better. There's always room to do better.
We spend more money, their test scores go down. We give the teachers union more power, the test scores go down. We have less choice and control over our our kids' educational options, the test scores go down.
Her point is
Why
that,
is that the test scores
her
go
point
down?
is, and I think her point for this book is that deleting history is not helpful for our students to be dumb about what happened historically, so that we don't repeat it. And if we base it off of, let's say we base it off somebody who's not President Trump, but similar ideas about the way our history should be presented in a more positive light, well, that would be problematic for people who really need to understand the impacts of some of the egregious things that our country did, as well as the beautiful things that make us America. And it's important to have both conversations and not just knock books out of school because they don't sit with you well, or because they're too negative, or because they show a same-sex relationship that has nothing to do with sex. Actually,
we're
just
taking
people
books
together.
out of
There's several layers to why she's saying this. No, we went through the segment before, went through all the books, and some of them I agree with you do need
Yes.
to go. But some of them that was a kid passing by the street, seeing a couple together, like that was like the incidents in the book. It's like they can't acknowledge that they're not going to go down. But no, there was a list of them, and I went to read each book, and I was like, wait, this one can stay. Okay, I can see the argument there for this one.
Well,
So
okay, but this is the brilliance of my plan, school choice. You could just send your kid to a school that has the exact books in the library that you think is appropriate, and so because we're never going to agree. What you think is right and appropriate for your kid, I might not think is right and appropriate for my kid, and that's fine. And rather than us having some toxic fight over which the uniform standard it has to be, why can't it just say the money the government collects to educate us, well, I give it to you, and then you, get your kid into whatever school you think is best for them, and you like the library and whatever other program you have, that works best for you, and Lindsay can do it differently, and Randy Weingarten can do it differently, and we can all be different, rather than I like this one, and I don't like this one. That seems stupid to me.
Well, I think in an ideal world, everyone would learn true history, things that actually happened, and then that would make for better people because they would understand. Disagree about what actually, facts have to be facts at some point, right? So yes, if you want to take out some of the books, I said I can agree with you there that have to do with sexuality. We can have a longer conversation, but history, if it happened, even if you think it's too negative, it's important that kids know it. Depending on which part of the curriculum and where, we could discuss, oh, that's better for 3rd grade, oh, that's better for 8th grade, but you don't take it out because it's too egregious if it actually happened.
We're not going to agree, so the best way is to just let you do it your way and me do it my way,
and
by having more options.
And there's another thing, she did address COVID. She said it fundamentally changed the relationship between schools and communities, so she understands that was a dramatic point for all people. She didn't just completely ignore it in the book. So
yeah. That was a big whoopsie on her part. Whoopsie.
She wouldn't have kept the schools closed till right now. That's an extreme over-exaggeration.
That was her position.
You don't like
COVID zero.
Okay, not zero, but
no, she literally said that.
I know, but we would have been here now, and it's pretty much we're in the clear for the most part compared
COVID
to where we were during the
That's
pandemic.
my point. COVID will always still exist, and anyway.
Robby, what's on your radar today?
Yes, let's get to it. Joe Rogan. He may be America's most useful bellwether. So goes Joe, so goes the nation. Seriously, it behooves us to listen to this man, the legend, the podcasting giant, and take some cues from him. His political instincts are closely aligned with millions of people who feel alienated from the establishment and the elite culture of both parties. Rogan was one of the first major independent media personalities to take the Bernie Sanders phenomenon seriously in 2016. During COVID, he was a walking, talking manifestation of populist dissatisfaction with elite lockdowns, mandates, and those sorts of things. And in 2024, his endorsement of Trump was a sign of the times, a sign that young people, working class people, male minorities, etc., were leaning away from the Democratic Party and toward Trump. Now, lately, he's expressed disappointment with some of Trump's policies, including mass deportation, not of violent criminals, but of absolutely anyone who's in the country illegally. He's also objected to aspects of our foreign policy, which he believes is too deferential to Israel. My bottom line is this. When Rogan has a take, we should listen, because he's not afraid to disagree with his side. In fact, he doesn't really have a side. So I think it matters that he's absolutely disgusted by the response of many people to the murder of conservative media giant Charlie Kirk. Let's watch.
I don't think some of the things he said he should have said, but the fact that people were cheering when he died, normal people, housewives, moms, people working at banks, people working at various industries, celebrating a man getting shot in front of his kids, in the front of the whole world.
That's evil.
What the f*** is wrong with us?
And it's just really weird now.
It's really weird, and it's celebrated to hate people. And that's the weird part. And most of us know that that's wrong.
Those remarks came during his discussion this week with the Red Clay Straws. It's a country band. Rogan went on to clarify he was talking specifically about the left's response. Here's a bit more.
Whether that person's on the left or the right, they just got shot in front of the whole world. It's not a thing to celebrate ever. And especially when you're seeing people on the left that are supposed to be progressives. These are supposed to be the kind, compassionate, inclusive people that are celebrating gun violence, public execution. Like, that's insane. That's a public assassination. That's insane.
Rogan speaks for a great many people who are just plain gobsmacked by the left's capacity for excusing violence, which was evident this week after the death of Assata Shakur, a well-known leftist radical and convicted cop killer whose poetry was praised by those mourning her passing. Kirk, on the other hand, is not being remembered fondly by the left, which is, of course, they're right. But when you have kinder things to say about an actual killer than you do about someone who merely used provocative language, I think that communicates something about your priorities. And guess what? The rest of us are noticing. We are noticing which of our countrymen condemn violence in all its forms, no matter who it targets. We are noticing who is making excuses for it, who would probably applaud it if it happened to us. And that is an ugly thought. So, Lindsay, we used to kind of cover the Joe Rogan show, spectate the Joe Rogan show every day on Rising. Haven't done it in a while. I haven't had any of his clips kind of cross my social media feed, which is usually how I check in with what he's saying. So I thought it was notable that I did see this one of him talking about his reaction to seeing people on the left. His read of the situation is people on the left excusing violence toward Charlie Kirk and how that's affecting him. And you've brought up, and this is true, that he's not on board or in love with everything Trump is doing. So that's maybe to push him back toward the Democratic side. But then again, if you have, this is the problem for Democrats, is the widespread perception that normal, ordinary people have with them having a proclivity for violence, the far left.
Yeah, and I think what Joe Rogan said is true. I mean, he said, I don't agree with everything Charlie Kirk said, but did you see the way that he was killed? That you should abhor that. And I think that anybody who's been in Democratic leadership over this time, that the unfortunate assassination of Charlie Kirk, has been very vocal about condemning this violence. I think that has to be clear. Even with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who we debated about the other day, he said, I hate to see this happen. That's terrible. So I think that has to be the first and foremost thing coming out of anyone's mouth. And then there is your ability to critique as part of what Charlie Kirk lived and stood for. So he would be able to critique people like George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, even though a lot of the world, we saw the whole world rally around the similar cause in that instance, saying that it was police going too far. He took an alternative side, and he's allowed to do that. He still was celebrated for having that perspective. You agree with him on many things, but maybe not that one instance. And I think that's what we have to allow for. And people have to continue to say and call out what Joe Rogan did. I think when we talk about Democratic leadership, a lot of people are conflating the statements that Joe Rogan is saying is that, everyone on the left, that makes it seem like there were some Democratic officials in Congress or a former president saying something like this. And I just think people online are largely negative. I can tell you about some comments that I got this week. It's like, okay, people are negative, and that's okay. People are individuals who have the right to be fired by their private company. Shall they behave like that? But for me, I can't police online. You don't want policing online. I look at X and I'm like, oh, God, it's a lot of negativity over there. But at the end of the day, it's not doing anything besides just perpetuating what we don't like as the best of society, but it exists. And that doesn't mean, hopefully, that our leaders and people who know better, like Joe Rogan talked about, moms, parents, teachers, we know better. So people should be aware of what your parents taught you. You don't anything nice to say, maybe don't say it, but we can't police online in that way. So I think when you broad stroke brush it and say that the left is saying all this stuff, it's like, well, these are people that maybe didn't get raised the right way. I can't speak. They don't speak for me. I don't speak for people online that were praising or celebrating a man being killed.
I don't. When you see the widespread negative comments about anything online, what is your feeling for how reflective is that of our society, our fellow?
Well, that's the thing. I know and have the privilege of being friends with independents, conservatives, Democrats, people who don't even vote. You know what I mean? I have a bunch of friends, and none of them started applauding during this. And the conversation has come up in group chats, in personal conversations.
You have friends all over the political spectrum?
Yeah, because of all the places I've worked at this point. You know what I mean? They're all over the political spectrum. But I think that the point is that none of them that I've had dialogue with, because it's been about a month now, have said, they're cheering this on. At the very most, they said what Ta-Nehisi Coates said, which was very much, I don't agree with this thing that Charlie Kirk said, this thing, and they have the right to say that.
I mean, there were people cheering it on.
No, there were people, but
saying,
you asked me if I think
you
asked me if I think that that's reflective of my real experience in life. I would hope not, and I don't think so. But when I see echo chamber online, know that that's created these spaces where you think, well, the whole world is thinking this. Like, for example, if I post my response to you about Assata Shakur on my page, the whole world said brilliant. If you post it on your page, I'm sure all of them will say terrible. And so that's just how we live in these echo chambers. And I don't think that represents what most people think. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle of the nuance of the conversation. What do you think?
I don't
think
know.
We're just that negative?
I think social media serves as people's internal monologue, and a lot of people express ideas that they would feel like it's just thoughts, internal thoughts. They don't feel it as something they're saying out loud, even though it is saying something out loud. I mean, sports brings out a nasty side in people, or celebrity spectating, or whatever you're passionate about brings out a nasty side in people sometimes. Doesn't mean you're a nasty person, and our politics increasingly resemble sports and entertainment, and I think that's what's going on. So it's not reflective of people at their core being, I hope.